Welcome back, everybody, here on this Friday edition of the program Off the Wall. Joey Kieran here with you, and happy to have you hanging out with us on this Friday, getting you ready for the weekend, having fun. But right now, we turn our attention to the Score Sports Hotline as we get ready to talk more about high school sports. We were just breaking it down a little bit on what the return of high school sports in the state of Oregon might look like as we are getting closer and closer to what is hopefully the first day of practices for high school football teams coming up in February. And to give us the latest on where things are standing, we get a chance to catch up with Peter Weber, who is joining us on the phone. Peter, thanks so much. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Joey. Good to talk with you.
Yeah, as always, it's great to have you on the program here with us, talking high school sports. It's the executive director from the Oregon School Activities Association. Peter, looking at it, obviously, there's a ton of question marks. I'm sure you've got people that are wanting to know answers from you today, yesterday, and 3 weeks from ago, but it has got to be tough where you guys are at right now. I guess the first question, we'll get the cat out of the bag here. Are we on track to see high school sports starting in February with practices and games in March like the OSAA calendar is currently set up?
You know, I really believe that we are. Now that may not mean all sports, and we can talk about that, but certainly as we look at what we have planned for season 2, sports like soccer and cross country that are allowed, they're outdoor sports, they're allowed in any county in the state. We feel really good about those getting started, on February 22nd and getting games going in March and getting kids back out there playing.
Well, that was kind of my next question is, how possible is it that we see some sports get a chance to play and some that are still waiting to find out or maybe just don't get a chance to play this year? Is that kind of the model where you guys are thinking that whatever we can get in on the current schedule we have, those sports will be playing, and we'll try to figure out some other method or model for the rest of them if we can before the end of the school year? Yeah,
I think that's exactly where the board has been. That's kind of what we tried to do with the season 1, wherever areas of the state could go in sports that were allowed, we wanted to provide that opportunity. I think the board is really focused on trying to provide that flexibility and really focusing on what we can do. There's so much around, things that we may not be able to do, not just in sports, but in general, but let's focus on the things we can do and get going for kids. And that's where the focus is. And the things that we can't, as you said, what can we do to try and provide that opportunity or a similar alternative opportunity or whatever that could look like. I know, for example, with volleyball, right now I think there's maybe about 50 schools in the state that, because of where they are in their counties, would be able to play volleyball. And the message that we've heard from other schools is, well, they should be able to play. They can go. Let's let them play. And then how do we figure out an opportunity for those other schools that currently, are in the extreme risk counties and can't do indoor competitions like that? What can we put together to provide some flexibility where it works for them, moving forward into the school year, to try and provide that opportunity for those girls?
We were talking about it as we were getting ready to come back here on the air, that a lot of this may be out of your control, the executive board, the OSAA, the governing body for high school sports in Oregon. You guys make a lot of regulations and rules for how high school sports are operated here in the state, but this is a bit out of your control because you have to abide by the state regulations and recommendations from the OHAA and the governor's office. What is the OSAA's role in all of this? What can you tell high schools that they can or can't do, and what is your guys' role in getting this to where we do see high school student athletes back out there competing?
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you bring up, Joey, that the reality is that the sports guidance and what's allowed in the state is being set in the governor's office. That's where that is being set. Obviously, OHA advises on that information, but that's where the decisions are made. Now that being said, our role is to be an advocate for getting activities back going as soon as we can, and obviously as safely as possible. And so we feel like that's our role in trying to influence that decision making that's going on at that level. But ultimately, when a decision is made, we just saw this morning some new indoor recreation guidance for extreme risk counties. When those decisions get made, then it's incumbent upon us as an association of schools to get that information out to the schools to try and answer their questions, interpret, clarify what the guidance is. So really, I think twofold, that advocacy piece and then the communication piece with the schools about within the parameters set by the governor's office or OHA, then these are the things that schools are able to do. And then, like you said, let's get going and doing them so we can get kids back out there playing.
Absolutely. How much, maybe it's not you specifically, but someone within the OSAA, department, how much communication do you guys have with people at the OHA or with Governor Brown directly? Is it daily, weekly, hourly? How much are you guys in the ear of them providing at least your interpretation of information out there on what it might be to getting sports back?
Yeah, I would go with consistent. Now, again, not directly, to Governor Brown, but the people in her office that are working on sports. Most of that communication is through me, working with them and then working with the OHA. I mean, we had a work session earlier this week with our executive board and had, representative from the OHA on that call talking with our board and giving our executive board members the opportunity to ask questions and advocate. And so that type of communication, in addition to things like emails and phone calls and stuff like that, is important. Yeah. And certainly that's what we've been trying to do, throughout the process, and seeing if there's a way to get some of these more restrictive guidances adjusted. We have seen some positive steps with some of the case counts coming down in the state. Certainly, as I mentioned, the new indoor extreme risk. Well, obviously I think everybody would hope it would be more that people could do. It's a step in the right direction from not being able to do anything indoors. So the trend is good. We just want it to happen as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And I know you guys, the focus is on doing all of this in a safe and responsible manner, as we talk with Peter Weber here from the OSAA and talk about the return of high school sports here in the coming weeks and month. How much do you guys look and study and research what's being done elsewhere around the state, or not the state, but around the country, as part of that evidence or part of the conversation that you have with the OHA and with Governor Brown? We see. I was just reading this morning about Washington opening up some regions of their state for basically all sports and football practices starting Monday. We've seen football going on throughout the country in other states. How much do you guys look at that, and what is that kind of information telling you about the possibility of being able to bring back high school sports safely?
Well, we look at it a bunch, and been on a lot of calls and Zoom meetings over the last couple of months with the directors and really in all 50 states, including extra meetings with the ones in the West. Some of whom have been playing, some of whom have not. But that's critical. I mean, just in the past 10 days, we've seen New York, we've seen Illinois. Got word from New Mexico that they're going to be back open. They removed some restrictions in California. So we're starting to see more and more in those states that didn't participate at all or very much in the fall. We're starting to see some of those things open up, including for contact sports. And that's all information and stuff that we're continuing to share with those decision makers at the state level. I think it's critical to see. I mean, we did a survey of all 50 states that we sent out right around the holidays, just trying to figure out from their fall sports. And again, some people played and some people didn't. The people who played, what did they learn? Maybe they went in thinking these were going to be the things they needed to worry about, and then they got into it, but it was something else. And so how can we learn from what they did and for the most part did successfully in order to have those things occur here? So that communication is critical. Again, it's for us the ability and the opportunity to get kids back participating. Certainly from a physical standpoint, but from a mental and emotional well-being standpoint, is just critical. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen as quickly as we can. Again, obviously, everybody wants it to be safe. Nobody's talking about going that direction, but what can be done to do that? And I think, again, the advocacy that we've seen from lots of different parts of the state, the work that we've tried to do, et cetera, hopefully we're seeing some of those things come to fruition.
Talking with Peter Weber here, the Executive Director of the Oregon School Activities Association. You mentioned, polling other states and finding out, and I'm curious in your mind what stood out to you from some of that stuff on what people learned throughout the process of holding sports in other states. You mentioned, they thought maybe one thing was going to be the biggest area of concern and found out once they started going, this was a bigger area of concern. Was there something from that that stood out to you most on what is an effective way to be able to do sports here as we try to kind of slowly make our way out of this pandemic?
Well, I think the thing that they rang through for me in looking at that information was that people were able to do it. That they went in thinking they would, and really for the most part they were able to do it. Now, not to say there weren't occasional hiccups and things like that, but that people, and especially the kids and the coaches, understood that having the opportunity to be there and participating, that they needed to follow the guidelines, they needed to wear the mask, they needed to do the things that were required in order to allow that to continue. And certainly what we've seen and heard from the schools around Oregon is that they are more than prepared to be able to do that, and understand that. And again, if that means, like the current guidance is, that people need to be wearing masks and all those things, then hey, let's put the mask on and let's start playing. So I think that really was encouraging. And again, we'd seen that, throughout the fall, but having that information, I think was important, as we move forward. Another piece that we talk a lot about with our board and as we talk to people at the OHA and governor's office is that whole equity piece of, we know there are students and families around our state that, have the means in order to travel to Idaho or Utah and go play in a club program or a basketball tournament or whatever that looks like. But that's not the reality for the vast majority of the kids and communities in our state. And that's where we believe that having the opportunity, again, in a safe manner to get those things going in our schools provides the best opportunity for all kids. And that really is taking that equity lens approach to those types of activities.
So as we start getting closer here, I know that we're probably all kind of waiting on pins and needles to find out what might change over the coming weeks here as we hopefully get close to the start of some high school sports practices in February. What are kind of the biggest hurdles that we need to clear? Is it just strictly releasing or easing of some of the restrictions that needs to happen for us to get to a point where high school practices in full start happening for all sports?
Yeah, I think that's the critical piece. I mean, really, as we said at the start, focused on the indoor piece with volleyball, and whether that's case counts coming down and counties getting out of that extreme risk, or again, as we saw today with a slight shift, maybe more shifting of the guidance from the state that would allow some of that to take place indoors. So that's key for volleyball. And then with the football, that again, the full contact prohibition, that needs to change. And again, we don't know that it will. We're continuing to advocate for it to change. We believe it can be played safely, given what we've seen, and as we mentioned before, from other states and the mitigation and controls and things that would be in place. And again, that's our hope. And if for some reason that doesn't happen, then we've continued to explore what some alternative options would be, because having that engagement for kids with each other, with their coaches, is critical. And if it can't be in one way, then how can we be flexible and try and have it in another way?
Yeah, that was kind of going to be my follow-up there is, as we start getting closer and closer to the timeline set by the current OSAA calendar, I remember originally, and it feels like it has been so much information constantly coming out on everything, so I could be a little bit past date on some of my updates on the information you guys have sent out, but I remember originally, there had been, you've got groups that are talking about these different sports and ways to make things safe and ways to be able to do it, and calendars and schedules and all that kind of stuff. And one of the ideas was, hey, if we can't do full contact football like we normally do, then maybe we do 7-on-7 or flag football or these different things. For football, that I know is everybody's, that's one of the top things on everybody's radar, but sports in general is. But if a sport is not able to play its normal means, are you guys looking at other possibilities of a different version of that sport to be able to allow those student athletes to still get some sort of competition?
Yeah, we're looking at those things. I mean, specific to football, and you hit it on the head. We've had conversations around, certainly 7-on-7 and flag. We've seen schools doing that in season one. Those things are allowed by the governor's office. even things, throwing around things like a virtual lineman challenge, or how do we get as many kids involved as possible. So those are all things that we're looking at because, we have to look at them. Certainly the goal is to be able to do the contact football and to get the okay to do that. But we're, trying to be prepared if we don't get that for what options we could provide, to students. It's back to what I mentioned about the volleyball, looking at the concept of if a school or, is in a county and they can't play volleyball when we get started, but it works for that school or a group of schools in a region or a county to play later in the year, then we would look at considering that with the board to be able to try and provide that opportunity where it makes sense for those schools.
As we keep going forward, what is kind of the schedule right now for the OSAA, for the executive board? What kind of things you guys have on your calendar here for the next couple of weeks as we start really getting close to that start time for high school sports?
Yeah, so we do work sessions with the board about every other week. We have a work session with them next week. We have a public meeting on February 8th, and that's kind of the meeting, we've been kind of pointing towards that, certainly we would like to have decisions by then as to what we're going to be able to do. We obviously know everybody wants to know, the schools want to know, the communities want to know, kids want to know, so that they can get going. And again, if for some reason a sport or sports are not able to go, then what are the alternatives? What are we able to look at there? So that's kind of the timeline in terms of what we're looking at. And again, just remaining in that consistent communication with OHA and the governor's office as to, are things going to change? Is there additional information or advocacy that we can provide in those areas to try and see if that guidance can be adjusted moving forward?
Well, Peter, it's been very informational from you there. Obviously, I know you've probably got people bugging you constantly, wanting to know what's the latest, and we are happy that you were able to come on and help answer some of those questions for our high school sports fans here in the Umpqua Basin on what we might be able to expect here going forward. And look forward to the updates. I think over the next couple of weeks we'll be getting more details, and hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed that it's good news for high school student athletes, coaches, and schools here coming up. I really appreciate the time today, Peter.
Hey, thanks, Joey. As always, I enjoy talking with you and having the opportunity to provide some information. We're hopeful for some good news coming up soon.
Well, hopefully next time we get a chance to talk, it's about actual events going out on a field putting on by the OSAA. I prefer those conversations a little bit more than these ones where we are left with a lot more questions than we are answers sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I look forward to that too.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joey.
No problem, Peter. That Peter Weber there from the Oregon School Activities Association, the executive director, as we are counting down, hopefully, the days and weeks until we start seeing high school sports ramping up here in the state of Oregon. We'll go ahead and take the break. We'll wrap up hour number 2 of Off the Wall. Odds and ends to get to. This show has had so much going on that we'll get to here as we wrap things up. Back after this quick break on The Score, 92.3 FM and 1490 AM.